So it's been a little bit of time since the Aztecs have come out, and I've been able to put some time into them, and in some regards, I honestly think that they're kind of broken. But then in other regards, they have some very glaring weaknesses. So this is just kind of like my quick overview of my initial thoughts of the Aztecs in Age of Mythology Retold. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more AOM Retold content. So let's go ahead and talk about the overall strengths of the Aztecs and kind of like where I think that they are just very, very overpowered. So first off is going to be their favor generation. Without a doubt in my mind, it is so overpowered in the way that you can generate instant favor for anything by sacrificing villagers in quick succession. And luckily they tell you how much you will generate so quickly. So it kind of helps to get it snowballing early on where you sacrifice a couple, one or two to start that trickle. But say, for example, you're in a late game situation where you need an instant use of a god power that you've already used, which is going to completely turn the tides of the battle. You just sacrifice a group of your settlers, and then there you go. It makes the counterplay and then the content against the Aztecs a little bit more difficult to deal with because it's unpredictable of how often they will be able to use their god powers. As compared to like the Atlanteans, where I have a lot more experience, usually the Atlanteans can use their god powers multiple times in relatively quickly because their favor isn't necessarily super high on the reuse of their abilities. For the Aztecs, I can just click a button and on demand have enough instant favor generation that I should be good to go. Now, that isn't to say that necessarily like everything is cheap. I think I played a lot of Quetzalcoatl. The baseline god power I'd have to use like, but the second use is still like 60 favor. So it's like roughly like 4 to 8 villagers to generate that enough to be able to use. So it depends on the use, but overall the instant favor generation is really, really strong, and in my opinion, it's kind of overpowered. All right, so the other aspect is the traps. Now, the traps that mainly the spies can use are very, very strong, and they're very, very useful. And that kind of goes along with the traps and then like the stealthing of the foliage so that you can set traps to be able to jump out and to surprise enemies with, you know, them being stunned, and here comes a whole bunch of your, your warriors jumping out, leaping into battle. It makes it a lot more engaging and strategic, true, and I would say possibly the best use of it I've found is because it generates a little bit of line of sight around where you are, is using it as like a hidden almost like obelisk in that sense, so like a lesser version of the obelisk, mainly because the spy himself doesn't really offer a whole lot as far as vision. He's not necessarily super fast. He doesn't cover a lot of view range as he's moving. There's a line of sight, so it kind of depends. You have to place them into their individual spots. Now, luckily, they're relatively cheap, so you do a couple of these, like 5 or 6 of them, spread out throughout the map, and you'll be able to have good vision of what's going on, which does help. But overall, the traps being put into, like, narrow choke points or near, we'll say, enemy gold mines and stuff like that, where you can see what's going on and you can see what's happening. In my opinion, that's crazy. That is so crazy. Now, lastly, the thing that I think that is kind of overpowered from the Aztecs is 100% their myth units. Their myth units are so strong. So strong. And they have so many different uses in that regard. Like, I like using the, I can't even pronounce the name, but the star witches, the star zombie things. I don't know how to pronounce this name, but they are so strong. And then it's like, if I go the other way for the heroic age, I can get an armadillo that acts as a siege weapon and that can roll towards its target from a long distance away. Like, that's a little bit overpowered. And even for the classic age, as again, playing Quetzalcoatl, the little statue that can sit there and become a turret is incredibly strong. And placed in the correct way, it can deal a lot of damage and be relatively safe. So I look at their myth units and I'm like, damn, they are pretty darn strong. Pairing that with the kind of instant favor generation, like they can lean heavily onto their myth units and be very, very successful. Now, that's all the glazing that I'll really do for the Aztecs in my immediate experience, I'll say. The kind of like negatives, we'll say the things that are holding it back are probably going to be like the hero limitations, how weak the settlers are anyway, and then of course cavalry. That is something that is a tough one to get away from. So the hero limitations really just are the warrior priests. Now you have to have a handful of them at least on the front lines to be able to deal with myth units, and it may end up being better for you to keybind them to their own individual groups so that you could focus fire the myth units down, because myth units against myth units, it's going to be difficult to tank them all. But the warrior priests themselves, I feel like, are a little bit underwhelming even against myth units. Maybe it's just in the limited experience that I've had thus far. I've probably played about like 15-20 matches, so I don't know necessarily if that's enough for me to assertively say that this needs to be buffed, but they certainly feel weaker as compared to other hero units. And I mean, I wouldn't say that they're as weak as priests. I'm sorry, priests are just abysmally weak against myth units, abysmally weak. Even though they have the damage multiplier. So I would say that their heroes being limited to just warrior priests and them not being necessarily super strong, I would say that's definitely holding them back. Another thing is how weak the settlers are. Oh my goodness, the settlers are made of paper. Like, it just takes 1 or 2 good raids and it's like they're all done. Like at a good raid of like 3 or 4 people, 3 or 4 enemy units, cavalry, and then we're screwed. Like the maybe it's because I'm noticing this because again, I played a lot of Atlantean and the citizens are somewhat durable. The citizens are pretty beefy in that regard, which makes sense because they count like as three villagers in comparison. So maybe that's not necessarily the best comparison, but holy crap, the settlers being so weak, and again, they're cheap. They're, you know, it's 50 food for a settler, and then you're meant to sacrifice them so you get favor. So I guess it kind of makes sense, but that has been a learning curve for me to understand the villager or the settler unit. Oh my goodness. And lastly is cavalry. Not being able to have access to cavalry until the mythic age that hurts. That is such a tough sell for me. And I'm kind of used to it, again, with the Atlantean play and not getting the Contariuses until we get into the Heroic Age, but the overall lack of cavalry makes it difficult. Now, let me put it this way, that most of the Aztec units just move very quickly, and you wouldn't expect them to have a whole bunch of horses and stuff like that. That makes complete sense. Aesthetically, I see what you're going for. Harder to counter those types of units, cavalry. It's harder to counter them because of their speed and then their overall resistance, typically resistance to piercing damage. Now, with the Aztecs, they are all about mobility, and a lot of their infantry is very, very fast, which is great, but a lot of their infantry is also very weak against ranged piercing damage. So, and I know that you have like the Coyote Warriors, which are basically the counter archers, which makes sense, and they do a great job, but it is so difficult to pull off raids appropriately with just having those kind of infantry. If they set up their fortifications appropriately, they set up a couple of towers, you know, they have maybe like the Greeks having a group of Toxotes sitting over there, it makes it very difficult for us to be able to counter those kind of things, unless I'm going pure Coyote Warrior. Now, and I will say overall, the Aztecs have been a hell of a lot of fun to play. Again, I've been playing almost exclusively Quetzalcoatl, and I love the build up. I love that I can sacrifice my turkeys to gain an overall, we'll say, boom to my economy. I do think that Quetzalcoatl is the most boomy out of the 3 options that we have right now. So I'm excited to play more. I'm excited to get more matches in and understand the overall play style, but I'm very much enjoying the way that the Aztecs have been rolled out. It is a great addition. It has been a hell of a lot of fun, and then also learning it, I think I've very much enjoyed it. So if you do like Age of Mythology Retold, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. If you want to see an aggressive Oranos build, one of my aggressive Oranos builds where I focus on early game pressure and then just domination from the start, you can click this video here. As always, stay caffeinated, folks.